Hello, good evening, Tanse, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. The Winnipeg Police Service says as a sign of respect, it will refer to the fourth unidentified victim of an alleged serial killer as a Buffalo woman, Majkade Bijikwe. Advocates and elders made the call at a vigil for the four last night in Winnipeg. The women's deaths and continuing violence against Indigenous people are being called a state of emergency. NDP MLA Bernadette Smith was at the vigil speaking to APTN today. Smith says Indigenous women are sacred and resources need to be put in place to stop the genocide. But she admits until systemic racism is addressed, it'll be an uphill battle.
They're in our institutions at the highest level, and they're being condoned and, given permission, and it's giving permission to society to just say, go ahead, abuse, Indigenous people and abuse Indigenous women. You'll get away with it and nothing will happen to you.
In a rare show of unity this afternoon, all members of Parliament stood for a moment of silence in memory of the four Indigenous victims identified as Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, Rebecca Contois, and the fourth now being referred to as Buffalo woman, believed to be in her 20s. Winnipeg Centre MP Leah Gazan demanded that Winnipeg's Brady landfill be searched for victims.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Another 3 Indigenous women were murdered by an alleged serial killer in Winnipeg, and police aren't going to look for their remains, which they believe are in the Brady landfill. Imagine hearing that about your relative, Mr. Speaker. And while the government stalls in providing resources, Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit continue to be murdered because we are a target, Mr. Speaker. Will the government provide immediate funding to stop this genocide and the resources to search for the remains of our precious sisters?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and our hearts go out to the families of the victims. It isn't on a day like this that we can sit here and pat ourselves on the back about what we've been doing as a government. Obviously, it has not been enough. It is very puzzling to hear the news that this landfill will not be searched. I spoke to the mayor of Winnipeg yesterday about this and hope to get some clear answers shortly. Clearly, the federal government needs to play a role in an area where jurisdiction is a poisonous word and continues to kill Indigenous women and children in this country.
Honourable member for Churchill-Kiwatanuk-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous women targeted and murdered again by a serial killer. This is a nightmare, a killer with a chilling connection to neo-Nazism. This is happening here at home in Manitoba, and more women have gone missing since. There must be a comprehensive federal response now. Emergency shelters, economic supports, and real action on the dangerous rise of white supremacy. The families of Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, Rebecca Contois, and the fourth loved one deserve justice. Indigenous women and Indigenous communities deserve urgent action now from the federal government. When will the Liberals finally act?
The Honourable Minister for Crown and Indigenous Relations.
Mr. Speaker, extremism of the nature described by the member opposite is one of the biggest terrorist threats in this country, and it continues to prey on those that are most vulnerable, including Indigenous women, children and girls and LGBTQ folks across the country. We need a comprehensive federal response. We need a comprehensive provincial response. We need a comprehensive municipal response. It's why, in part, I've called for a federal, provincial, territorial and Indigenous meeting in January to discuss the painful issue of MMIWG and why we continue to fail as governments in making sure that everyone in this country is indeed safe. Thank you.
Here.
Now, Jeremy Skibicki was charged last week with 4 counts of first-degree murder. The Crown announced it would proceed by direct indictment in the case, meaning there will be no preliminary hearing to decide whether there is enough evidence to proceed to trial. Skibicki remains in custody. All right, we want to hear what you think about what you've seen so far tonight. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Quebec's challenge of Bill C-92, the federal legislation that establishes Indigenous control over child and family services, will be heard by the Supreme Court of Canada this week. The Assembly of First Nations held a press conference in Ottawa Monday, outlining all the reasons why the Legault government shouldn't be contesting the legislation. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
When the Trudeau government passed Bill C-92 in 2019, Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief for Quebec and Labrador, Ghislain Picard, says the Quebec government had a choice. Either hand the reins of child welfare to First Nations or take it to court. Now it's days away from going to the highest court in the land.
And I've said this to the governor of Quebec a number of times. You had the opportunity to do things differently, but you have chosen the other route. And as we've seen in the past couple of weeks, the government of British Columbia has decided to adopt a law that gives that capacity for First Nations in that province. Why isn't it possible for Quebec to do the same?
AFN Manitoba Regional Chief Cindy Woodhouse says provinces should be working with First Nations to implement the legislation rather than fighting them in the courts.
Provinces and territories must work with First Nations to support the implementation of the Act and First Nations laws through meaningful engagement, not fighting First Nations rights and jurisdiction by taking us to the Supreme Court.
For his part, AFN BC Regional Chief Terry Teegee says by challenging the jurisdiction of the bill, provinces like Quebec are only further perpetuating an already broken child welfare system.
The statistics show that many of our Indigenous children are in care. And as we've stated here many times, here in Canada, it's the new residential school. Whether it was 60s scoop or child welfare or the millennial scoop, far too often our children are in care, and this is why our Indigenous peoples need to assert our jurisdiction over child welfare.
Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations Vice Chief David Pratt had this message for both the Supreme Court and provinces.
What I want to remind the provinces and the Supreme Court is that our laws and jurisdiction over our children existed for 10,000 years and more on Turtle Island here in this area. And I just want to state for the record too as well that not only are we supporting the Quebec challenge, we are also united in terms of asserting the jurisdiction and the sovereignty that we've never given up.
The Supreme Court will hear the case on Wednesday and Thursday. The AFN Special Chiefs Assembly begins tomorrow in Ottawa. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
It was a very long weekend for the 20 volunteer firefighters in Pagnertung, Nunavut, where a fire at the wood and metal dump burned all weekend. Pagnertung is located about 50 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle on the eastern side of Baffin Island and is home to around 1,500 people. A fire started in the community's wood and metal dump. It started early in the morning on Friday and was finally out by Sunday afternoon. Frozen hoses were the big challenge on Friday evening, but Saturday brought a new challenge. Their mayor explains.
It hit over to the metal dump, and that's where we had some of our recycling containers set up, which had some propane tanks, televisions, batteries, and once the fire hit that, they had to take a break because it was causing the propane tanks to go off and explode.
All right, it's time to step aside for a short break. We'll have more news when we come back. Welcome back to APTN National News. Remote settlements in Nunavut have rich histories, but they also have major problems, such as high prices, addiction, and mental health. But one Western Nunavut community is more than happy to share what's going right, and that's all thanks to wellness programming. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs brings us to Kugluktuk for this story.
Kugluktuk, the westernmost community in Nunavut. Breathtaking Arctic scenery, not to be overshadowed by the harsh realities that come with its remoteness. And for the roughly 1,600 Inuit who call this land, sea, and sky home, they're tackling the challenges head-on, pouring their hearts and souls into improving individual and collective wellness. This bi-weekly women's wellness group continues to grow in size. It's casual yet constructive, as the ladies choose the topic of the day and participate in corresponding activities.
So as you can see here, you have food, rent, clothing.
Like today's budgeting game.
It is the women of Kugluktuk that have done this program. Like, they're the ones that invest their time and they bring other people with them and they talk about their own programs.
Jane Lemure with Territorial Family Services is here on an 8-month contract.
For us even, they don't always want to talk to us because you're only going to be here for a minute and then you're going to be gone. And it's true, we are. So that's where the supports and the coping skills all need to come and because it's going to be theirs.
Why is wellness programming important? The hamlet deals with the same problems many other high Arctic communities face: mental health, high cost of living, and bootlegging.
Unfortunately, it does cause a lot of harm in that way, where families will lose money that instead of buying food for the family, they'll go towards liquor.
Mayor Simon Koloktana says the hamlet used to employ an alcohol committee comprised of members who would review applications from individuals to purchase booze.
The committee met regularly, but after a couple of years, the issues started coming up where they wouldn't have a quorum. So there would be a backlog of applications when they do meet, and that had a negative impact at the end of the day, where large orders would come in.
Like many other remote Nunavut communities, Kugluktuk has had heavy restrictions on the purchase of alcohol for years. But in December 2018, the community voted 61% in favor of doing away with all restrictions. Folks APTN spoke with said no restrictions to alcohol and the COVID-19 pandemic led to a surge in addictions. So in May of 2022, residents passed a vote to have restrictions back, with an increase in mental health programming, like the Women's Wellness Group.
Beautiful life.
An area wellness coordinator, Julia Norberg, is working on, as evident in her Igloo of Life, depicting current and future programs here.
This could be a village of ideas and programming that you'd like to see, program that is done. I was thinking of putting sea animals in here because, we have the land, water, and the sky where we could do a lot of our programming and our learning from in our traditional aspects with the schools and, tie in with a lot of our community businesses as well. So I'm happy to be here.
With determination to improve their situation, fly-in services and status quo will no longer suffice. Stay tuned for more stories on the community working towards food security, employment, and traditional economy. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Kugluktuk.
All right, it's time for one final break, but our photo of the day is next. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Tori Kress was out for an early morning res cruise when she stopped to capture the sunrise as seen from the Beausoleil First Nation located just north of Barrie, Ontario along the Georgian Bay. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca and your photo might just be our next photo of the day. Thanks for that one, Tori. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting over in the east, 3 degrees in St. John's and 6 in Halifax. -1 in Cartwright and -11 in Coujawak. 5 degrees in Quebec City and -1 in Val-d'Or. 6 degrees in Toronto and 1 in North Bay. -11 and some snow in Timmins and -25 in Big Trout Lake. -27 in Churchill and -27 in Thompson. Snow and -19 in Barons River and -19 in Winnipeg. -19 and some snow in Regina and clear and -24 in Saskatoon. Clear and -25 in Buffalo Narrows and -24 in Stony Rapids. Making our way west, clear and -26 in Fort Chipewyan and -27 in Peace River. -23 in Clear in Edmonton and snow and -19 in Calgary. 3 degrees in Vancouver and 3 degrees in Campbell River. 5 in Sands Pit and -24 in Fort Nelson. -10 in Whitehorse and -14 in Old Crow. -30 in Norman Wells and -32 in Yellowknife. -22 in Nunavut and -29 in Colville Lake. -25 in Cambridge Bay and snow and -26 in Chesterfield. -16 in Resolute and -4 in Iqaluit. A documentary film about a group of elders in northern BC who will stop at nothing to protect their land is being shown at film festivals across Canada. APTN's Tina House has this story.
Deep within the traditional territory of the Tahltan Nation in northern BC is a place known as the Sacred Headwaters. It's beautiful, rugged, and a pristine wilderness, but it also holds valuable and rich deposits of gold, copper, gas, and coal. For the elders of the Tahltan Nation, also known as the Klabana Keepers, it's a place they are fighting to protect from industry.
For the people that don't know who the Klabana Keepers is, I'll say we're powerful good elders. We call ourselves warriors because we try to protect the land. Because no money in the world will bring back the beauty of the land.
And in 2005, the Klabana Keepers defied court injunctions and RCMP arrested 15 elders.
I'm here because of the sacred headwaters that flowing through Stikine and Skeena and the fish that we depend on survives by.
Jerry Kwok, who's in a wheelchair, was also arrested that day.
Scrubby little jail, too old. Small, hard bed. I lay on it whole, like laying on cement floor.
In 2013, the Klabana Keepers were successful in stopping Shell from their plan to extract coal bed methane gas, with the company spending $32.5 million on the project. Later that same year, Fortune Minerals also announced plans to scrap their coal mine after facing fierce opposition from the Klabana Keepers. Rhoda Kwok and John West were in Vancouver to present their film at the Vancouver International Mountain Film Festival. For Rhoda, she says the feeling when you're on the land is unexplainable, and that's why they are fighting so hard to protect it.
It's a place where we go to rejuvenate, like if we're feeling like really overwhelmed with life or whatever, we go up there, and it's also a place where we connect with our ancestors, and it's really something else. Like it's a beautiful place.
For John, who helped start the Klabana Keepers, he says he's doing this for future generations.
And I'll quote Gerald Amos. He said, "You're the pebble
that hit in the water that's going to reverberate around the world. And it's happening. And it's happening. And we're not done.
And with Klabana Keepers making its world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival recently, and now in Vancouver, their message is reverberating around the world. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The 2022 edition of the Whistler Film Festival was back last week. There was plenty of Indigenous talent this year, including feature-length and short films. Cree filmmaker Jules Kustachin, who was just announced as one of Variety's 10 Canadians to watch, debuted her film Broken Angel at the festival last week, and I caught up with her last week. Jules, congratulations on your new film Broken Angel. Can you tell us a little bit about the project?
Yeah, so I used to work in the social service sector maybe about 10 years ago, and I ran a women's shelter. So this story of Broken Angel actually derives from that experience, working with like our community and children. So I feel like this film is a reflection of that time in my life. I started writing it back in 2006, and we were in production last year, and now we've just launched our film. So it's been a very long journey.
Now, as we mentioned in the intro, you were just named by Variety as one of 10 Canadians to watch. What does that recognition mean to you?
It's interesting because my son is with me, so there's actually 11. It's like 2 for 1 here, but no, that's totally cool. It feels great to be recognized for the work that I've done. I feel like I've been on this path for a very, very long time, so it just feels reassuring that I've made the right choice in terms of my career path. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to the doors that open because of this recognition. I feel like there's going to be many more projects coming my way. And being an Indigenous person, I feel that it's our time to tell our stories our way. So it's just an exciting time.
And Jules, there was also some big news recently announced about an upcoming project you're working on, about the adaptation of a Richard Wagamese's novel. Can you tell us a bit about your role in that project?
Yeah, so I met Dennis Foon, who is my mentor at the Whistler Screenwriters Lab for Broken Angel. And my name was put forward to write with him, and we co-wrote the script, and it's based on the novel, as you just mentioned, and it just feels like such an honor to be part of that project because I just love Richard Wagamese and I love his work, and I just feel like to be a part of this honor, I don't know, it's a really special book. It speaks to our lived experience as Indigenous people. It speaks to our resilience, and I feel like it's time. And it's important that Indigenous people are part of these kinds of projects that have to do with Indigenous lived experience. So I don't know, we've been working on it for a very long time. Just happy that it's out in the world right now, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully we'll be in production very soon.
Well, yes, we certainly look forward to seeing that. And Jules, we'll have to leave it there, but we certainly appreciate you taking some time out of your day. And again, congratulations on your film.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It'll be on APTN soon.
All right, that's all we have for you on this Monday edition of APTN National News. As always, if you missed any of our stories tonight and you want to catch up, you can do so at our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you at home for joining us. Miigwech, and have a great night.